Welcome to Cooking the Books. I'm Frances Cook. I'm a firm believer that managing your money is actually about anything but money. Piling up cash just for the sake of it isn't just boring, it's pointless. Study after study has shown a big pile of cash on its own won't make you happy. But deciding what you want out of life and using money as a tool to get you there, now that's something I could talk about all day. The latest research from ANZ shows the sorts of changes most of us would like to make when thinking along these lines. Especially after the impacts of COVID-19, family is the most important thing for most of us. 68% of those surveyed said wealth was being able to pay for things that would help their family thrive. Now, unfortunately, while trying to do that, 77% of us feel we could do better with our money. The biggest priority for most people is learning how to invest or save more, while paying off debt and mortgages is the second biggest area. So good news, you're in the right place. Let's figure it out.
News Talk ZB presents Cooking the Books with Frances Cook.
I'm joined now by Ben Kelleher, Managing Director for Personal Banking at ANZ. Now, I always feel like money is actually about anything but money. And this research you've produced really confirms a lot of New Zealanders feel the same way. Tell me a bit about what financial well-being means to most New Zealanders and why we say we actually want it.
Financial well-being is an interesting concept, right? And it's we've sort of defined it being in charge or in control of your money rather than your finances being in control of you. And it really breaks down into two key areas. One is around not borrowing, I guess, or taking out credit against day-to-day consumables. So, if you need to pay for something, like a new pair of shoes, ideally you wouldn't use debt to do that or take out credit to do that. And then the second piece is around making sure that you've got a rainy day fund. So having a little bit of money squirreled away. And we know that even with $1,000, that significantly increases people's sense of financial well-being. And so it's really about that control piece, people feeling in control of their money, and how they feel about the future around that.
And it's interesting because those are quite simple concepts, not always easy to do in practice, right? But they're
Correct.
Simple things that can make a big boost to your financial well-being. And what people are saying they want that for is looking after their families, right? Which is quite interesting to me.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And I think what we've got to be careful of is when we talk about financial well-being, it's not talking about getting rich. It's not, it's really about, as I said, it's that feeling of, am I in control? And do I know where my money's going? And have I got enough just to pay for those extra expenses that crop up every now and again? Like I've just the last couple of days, there's some building work going on at the house next door. And so I think the builders have dropped a few nails and I've had a flat tire. So I had to go and get my tire replaced, right? And so that's a good example of something that you didn't have planned for, but you've got to be able to fix. Otherwise you can't drive your car. So, things like that just crop up every now and again that, if you've got a bit of money squirreled away, then that can help. One of the things that we've seen in the recent surveys, though, to your point, is around people's sense of wealth being really focused around family and their ability to help make payments to help their family thrive. So the ability to meet their debts and their day-to-day obligations around finances so that they can help their family thrive and be successful. And what was interesting of that research is that was really strong in the under 30s category. So those aged under 30 have really were actually stronger than some of the other age groups around calling out that family component. And I think we're starting to see that generally in society. And I think, you hear about the millennials or the different categories of age groups coming out even before the millennials are now starting to look at things like purpose around what organizations they work for. And so I think that purpose is also spilling over into what am I doing with my finances, and why am I trying to save money, or what's the purpose of that? And so it's really cool to see that they've linked up that purpose with helping their families thrive. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think I saw some other research post-COVID that said we'd really all sort of turned inwards a bit after all of this. And obviously lockdown focused us all on the home, but it's dragged out a bit more and really focused on those sort of your local community, your family, your close friends, and that people now are very focused on those more traditional, closer values, and that's what they want to look at and protect. And it's the old thing, isn't it? That old saying of wealth is being able to pay for what you need and not worry about it, because we could all try to be Jeff Bezos, but that feeling of not worrying is huge for people, isn't it?
Correct. And I think it extends just beyond financial concerns, right? Because if you're struggling to meet your day-to-day commitments financially, then that obviously puts a lot of stress on yourself health-wise, and it can also spill over onto the family and the communities around you. So financial well-being does have a wider impact than just your finances. And so we're really keen to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help educate customers. And as I said earlier, having those two key principles around not necessarily borrowing money to pay for day-to-day consumables. And I think there's a really good delineation there between paying for something or borrowing for something that's perhaps a more of a long-term asset. And I use education as a good example of that. So if you wanted to go to, chef school and be a fantastic cook, well, that's great, because if you borrowed against, to go to that course, then that's actually increasing. Hopefully, it's increasing your future earnings capacity. So that's good debt, right? Because that's actually creating a better future for you financially. But then, borrowing to pay for day-to-day things like that new pair of shoes that you've just got to have, or the new e-bike that everyone's driving around, seem to be biking around on these days. That's not, that's potentially something that is often, if you're borrowing against it, is often at higher interest rates as well. And so that's something to watch out for. And then, of course, that having that little bit extra money squirreled away is useful. The thing I would say, though, is when we're talking about financial well-being, we see it in banking as well, that just because you earn a whole lot more money than others. So we see customers that will have a really high salary, but are still struggling to meet day-to-day. They're living week to week, month to month, because they're sort of spending to how much they're earning as well. So it's not a certain sector of society. It's across the board in terms of, I think all of us can improve our financial well-being in one aspect or another.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes people get annoyed at budgeting advice. And this is why we always say you've got to apply things to your own situation, because there are a lot of people who earn a lot of money who you can see articles on it, and it's actually not all that uncommon, who will say, oh, I just don't know how people get by, and we're living week to week. And it's unfortunately lifestyle inflation, where they've started to see certain things as necessary and have to haves when they're actually nice to haves. And actually, if you give up some of that stuff that you think is making you happier, it can actually, that feeling of security that comes with not living week to week will actually make you happier. And to that point, I thought it was interesting where the research came out and said two of the big priorities for people, what was it? I can't remember the number. I haven't written it down. But it was, I think, 77% of people felt they could do better with their money, which is the vast majority of us. And within that, most people were saying they wanted to save or invest more. So growing your pot. And the next priority was paying off debt and mortgages. So cutting what's holding us back. Why do you think those are such a big focus for people?
Well, I think so saving more. There's one thing is I think everyone at some point in time probably wants to try if they can to get into a house. That seems to be a national love for New Zealand, and so a lot of the time people are saving for their first home or for their next piece. So that saving element's really important. But then also just having that, as I mentioned, that buffer. I think people realise that even if they do have even 1,000, 2,000, whatever it is, squirreled away, then that's really important. Now, I think what's also really important, though, is not to compare yourself to your neighbours or your friends. And I think we all have, everyone has different circumstances. They have different commitments. Their health needs might be different. Their family needs might be different. You don't know who's got an inheritance, who hasn't. Some people have luck, some people don't. And I think the thing that we're sort of calling out around financial wellbeing is it's, play your own game. And that's about educating yourself. We talk a lot about things like understanding the benefits of compounding interest, but also being wary of it as well, depending on whether you're saving or you're paying off debt. I think Albert Einstein said the eighth wonder of the world is compounding interest. And for those that understand it, earn it. And for those that don't understand it, pay it. So it's, things like that. And KiwiSaver is a great example of this. We really want to encourage people, if they can, to at least put the minimum contribution into their KiwiSaver. So if they pay just over $1,000 in contribution a year, the government will give them just over $500 back, and that's a super return on anyone's books. So that's a no-brainer. If people can do that, then they should absolutely be doing that. And the compounding effect of that over time is just amazing. I think that's there's an education thing that I think we can all get better at. And for those that are perhaps struggling with it, there's some really good tools available. So there's Money Talks, which is a sort of non-judgmental online or a non-judgmental budgeting tool or service that you can go to. You can see them online. So Money Talks, and they're national and they're based across the country, and they help people with budgeting services, and they have some really good tools available. And then also things like sorted.org. There's some great hacks and tools on there to help people with their individual circumstances. And for some, we talk about, don't pay for that coffee, or don't go to the supermarket when you're hungry. Well, for some, that might be a really good tip. For others, they might say, I can't be productive if I don't have my morning coffee. Or, how am I supposed to go to the supermarket? If I'm hungry, what am I supposed to do if I don't go to the supermarket? So it's all individually based, right? And we've got some great tools at ANZ online as well around how you can help. It's that how piece and just the education around that.
Yeah, and I've got to say, as someone who is currently pregnant, if I didn't go to the supermarket when I was hungry, I would never go to the supermarket. So, and this is why we say apply everything to your own individual circumstances.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm always hungry, so I'd be living in the supermarket.
Secretly also pregnant? That might be a miracle.
No.
So it's a good point. It's that it's funny, isn't it? The coffee thing is a classic where, of course, that can save you money. But if you can fit it in your budget and it genuinely makes you happy, great. Focus on maybe the bigger expenses first. Have a look at housing, transport, food, all that sort of stuff. For people who are looking at, so that's, obviously the saving part, but also people who are looking at maybe are curious about investing. We've seen so many people be interested in that. Is there a good way for them to start investigating that?
Oh, absolutely. And there's a range of options available across the industry for that. You can kind of do it almost self-service now with things like Sharesies, which is pretty cool. And then you've got other providers, and ANZ is one of those, but there's a whole range of providers that will provide managed fund services across both domestic shares and then international shares and bonds and so on. So if people are interested in that, I would suggest that they look into that more, because it is a great way to, talking about compounding interest. It is a good way to start building your wealth up in other areas as well, outside of traditional term deposits and savings accounts. And it also takes us away from our obsession with the housing market as well. And I think anything that sort of helps to balance that a little bit is a great thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's when you talk there about the compounding, and it's the old thing of people overestimate what they can do in a week and underestimate what they can do in 5 years.
Right.
I ran a compound interest calculator on myself the other day, and for those who are interested, if you literally put compound interest calculator into Google, I think the first result that comes up is investor.gov, which is the US securities website. It's entirely legitimate. It's a great one to use. And you can just put in how much money you're putting in each week. And if it's a savings account, you might say it's a 2% interest. If it's you're putting into shares, you might say 7% interest. And then you say, I'm doing that for this many years. And it's incredibly motivating. You know, you can see the first few years, what you put in and what you're getting back, kind of close. But after 10 years, 20 years, those lines shoot apart from each other.
Yeah.
And one of the calculations I looked at, it had the lines shooting apart like this little skinny triangle that just suddenly at the end just went up like a hockey stick. And I think sometimes if you can see it like that, if you can see what you will get back at the end, and how much more you get if you just leave it alone to let compounding do its thing, our
Yeah.
brains kind of don't figure out compounding, but they know what a graph looks like. And
Yeah.
it kind of helps our monkey brains get it, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think there's that snowballing effect, right? So it's earnings on earnings, and that just gets larger and larger and larger. And you're right. It's hard to conceptually think about when you see it on a graph. Like, wow, that's impressive. And I think the key thing is that the earlier you can start with that kind of habit around savings or investing, the better off you'll be in the long term. And I think it's a really important point.
Yeah, and the other one that people were talking about, of course, debt and mortgages. If people are, and that's a fabulous focus for people, I think I've talked to so many people who managed to get themselves either debt-free or debt-free apart from the mortgage, and the mortgage is shrinking every day. And the difference it makes for their mental well-being, nobody has ever regretted it. And so many people feel amazing. It can feel like slow going at first, but you can actually over time stick with those changes, make huge progress. So if people are wanting to attack either sort of the credit card debt or the mortgage debt, I mean, are there good ways to start on that and make decent headway?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say is it's really cool to have a goal, and I think New Zealanders like to have goal. We it's something that's tangible that you can sort of head towards. So I would step back from them and go, so what am I trying to do? Is I'm trying to pay off my home loan off in 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is that I want to do? Or is it I've got a credit card bill and I want to try and pay it off in, I don't know, 6 months? So whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. And then step back and go, so if I need to do that, what does that mean for me? Does that mean that I need to be paying, how much do I need to be paying each month to work that back? And your organisations that have given you that debt can help you with those calculations as well. They should be able to help you with those calculations to inform you or to arm you with those bite-sized chunks of information that can help you get ahead and stay on top of your money. So I think that's my advice. I think the other thing I would say is if you feel like you are starting to see signs that you might not be able to pay your next credit card bill or your next mortgage payment, then speak to your organisation that's provided that to you early. The earlier you speak to them, the better off we can put. They can put options in front of those customers to help them. The worst thing you can do, I say, the worst thing you can do is sort of put your head in the sand and because that doesn't help you. And ultimately, if you kind of air your concerns, then actually other people can wrap around you and help you with that support. I think that's a really important thing. We see too many people probably worry that they don't want to share their concerns, and in doing so, they actually exacerbate their issues. So yeah, I think that the days of sort of organisations trying to, the big bag organisations trying to get as much as possible. I think I speak for ANZ, but we're keen as much as we can to try and help people pay off their home loans as fast as possible. And that's something that we're really focused on. And I've got a team of people working on that at the moment, just trying to, put some initiatives around that. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think that's so true because, of course, a bigger organization like yours, you have people and resources that are actually there to make sure you get a good outcome for everyone. Because, of course, there's heaps of legislation around that says you need to be a responsible lender. And I do think that, especially at the bigger organizations where there's resources, that's great. And you can often get good help. I remember even, this is going back a while, I'm going to be showing my age here. But when I was a student, and I sometimes had a habit of avoiding bad news, I was literally getting chased for, this was obviously a much smaller thing, but overdue video fees, RIP video shops. And I just ran away from it for a few months until they sent me to a debt collector, which freaked me out. And so then I called them and said, oh, could I actually just set up a payment plan or something? They were so nice, got pulled back from the debt collector with all of the extra fees that go with that. That was all wiped, put on a payment plan. It was fine.
Yeah.
And even stuff like, obviously several tiers down from an organization like yourself, but loan sharks. Well, if someone gets into hot water with maybe not a good lender, there are also, you mentioned Money Talks earlier, fabulous. There are free budgeting advisors with groups like the Salvation Army as well. They'll sometimes help you take a loan shark to court and see if you don't actually have to pay everything that they're saying you have to pay. So there are options, right? You just kind of have to, you have to stop letting the fear make you inert, and you have to face it.
Yeah, and I think the more we can educate ourselves around that, the better. And so I think, as you said, Francis, there's lots of tools around to help. And so people shouldn't be scared. There's no stigma around putting your hand up for that kind of stuff. And I think the key things are making sure, and I always say that if you are taking out credit with whoever it is, or borrowing money from whoever it is, making sure you really understand the terms and conditions of what you're doing. Because that's a really important point, and that even extends to things like buy now, pay later. We're seeing a really a strong lift in that, and that's fine. But people need to understand that is still credit, because you've still got to pay it back. And we're seeing a lot of that the younger customer groups getting more into using that more. And so that's just something that I guess is just a watching point to make sure they understand that they still have to pay it back. And that, what are you actually signing up to? And then also, I think as part of your overall managing your finances, if you've got multiple debts, it's also looking at it going, what's the highest priority right now? And what am I paying more interest on? And sometimes consolidating that down into one single debt, whether that's a personal loan with a structured payment plan, is often more helpful than having 3 or 4 debts sort of spiraling out of control. And that's the kind of thing that, people can help with as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting there you mentioned about for younger people, because one thing that stood out to me in the research you guys have put out is people love ripping on the younger generation. And by younger, I'm talking sort of those under 30. But your research really showed that actually these people are focused on their financial future. They're trying to make the right decisions for it. It's just sometimes a little confusing and overwhelming what's the right thing to do. And I think it really shows that old avocado on toast myth holds less weight every single day. So is there anything in particular that the younger generation should be focused on for that financial well-being and that feeling of security?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is making sure that they understand, as I said earlier, making sure they really understand what they're signing up to if they do that. And I think about myself. There's things that I don't read maths well. I don't. Maybe it's a bloke thing. I don't probably take instructions that well. I've probably got my short-term memory is very short.
You're telling on yourself here.
And I think if anything's longer than a Twitter feed these days, they'll probably lose interest pretty quickly. So I think you've got to have that discipline around really understanding what you're signing up to. But then also, we see some really cool even the staff that come through to us, graduates and stuff that come through to us, just the attitudes of them around, squirreling a little bit away. Doesn't matter how much you earn. Often there's, even if you squirrel, even if it's $10 a week, whatever it is, pay yourself first. We talk about paying yourself first, which is taking a little bit out of your salary as soon as it comes in, or your earnings as soon as it comes in, so you don't notice it's there, and that's locked away for savings. And so if you've got the ability, I think, at that young age to create that discipline, which is such a great habit to take you further on in life, that's, you're setting yourself up well, and then understanding where your money's going around, any debts that you have, or if not debts, just understanding where you're spending your money. And that's not to say you shouldn't spend it where you're spending it. That's up to everyone how they do that. But it's just that control piece, really understanding it. And the more you understand it, the more likely you are to be able to pull different levers should you need to.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on with that. I mean, those little changes that you can make are actually super powerful. I know that a lot of younger people feel frustrated because you're often at the beginning of your career, you do not have a lot of spare money, you're trying to pay astronomical rents if you're in one of the main centers.
Yeah.
But do not underestimate what you can achieve with $5 a week, $10 a week. You don't have money at that stage of your life, but you do have time, right? And this is what we were talking about before with compounding. I mean, when I was trying to first get my savings account looking healthier, it was $20 a week. When I later on started investing, it was $5 a week. And okay, I do more than that now because I'm earning more now and I'm in a different financial situation. But those things, it was a small step that made me feel like, oh, I've got this and I'm doing something, which is powerful mentally in itself. But also, even those little amounts, like putting $5 into a shares account when you're 20 is about as powerful as putting 20 in when you're 40. The power of time and what it can do for you if you just put it in and leave it alone, incredible, right? Don't underestimate the small things.
Exactly. I remember putting a little bit of money, working through university, and scored a little bit of money away, and then managed to put some into shares. I pretty much lost it all. But the educational experience that I had through that has helped, it's helped me build on that experience and go further on. So, sometimes it doesn't have to be, you don't have to win with that money, so to speak. Sometimes it doesn't just be an educational thing. It can be just building a habit. It can be learning new things that help you ultimately be better with your money. So, yeah, exactly. Completely agree. And I think, as I said earlier, the more you can think about it, and that's not to be obsessed with it, but it's that if you apply kind of grey matter to this stuff, you can sort of get better control around it.
Yeah. It actually, that's really funny. It's a very similar story for a lot of people when they start out with shares. Is you start out and you've maybe read some books, listened to some podcasts, I hope, and you know the ground rules of what you're aiming for, and then you trial it out, and it's always a little bit different in practice. There will be things that happen. The market might go through a dip, it freaks you out, you react differently from what you thought you would. You're going to be a lot happier with that experience if you've only built up $20 to $100 than if you started when you're in your 40s and you put in $20,000 all in one whack and then it all goes wrong. That's actually a pretty bad outcome. Whereas if you start small when you're young and you're like, I'm just figuring this out, this is educational money, then it might go well, it might go brilliantly, or it might go differently from how you thought, and you can adapt your strategy. You learn your emotional reaction to how different things happen. I think the starting small when you're actually not earning that much is not only not a bad thing, I sometimes feel like it's quite a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. And we'd encourage people if they can. And obviously it's horses for courses. Sometimes, often it's, if you've got debts to pay, then you're probably better off, depending on the size of the interest rates and stuff, you're probably better off just trying to get those under control. But to the ability you can to, as I said, to squirrel some things away, and to use that to invest in either education if you can, or to build up your future earnings potential, or to save for a house, which is obviously something that is close to all of New Zealand's hearts. And then, or like you said, to build your experience and your understanding of how things like the share markets work is a great thing to do young, and then it builds that foundation which you can then take on into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's summarize a little bit. So it's a lot of us are looking at we just want to be able to take care of unexpected expenses and maybe the people who are close to us. To do that, saving and investing and cutting debt are big priorities for people. Don't be afraid of starting small. You can do more with a small amount than you might think. And also invest. Don't be afraid to invest in yourself as well. Not all debt is bad. You'll, of course, want to pay it off, but think about what your goals are, what you're wanting to achieve, and then apply your money habits to that. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think let's not be too hard on ourselves. Like, as I said, don't look at your neighbours. Have your own game. Play your own game, and just as much as you can. If you can educate yourself further, and there's lots of great tools around. Websites, talked about a few today. Sorted, Money Talks. All of the banks will have things on financial wellbeing. The more you can sort of read up on that stuff and educate yourself, then I think the better you'll be in terms of knowing which levers to pull.
I think absolutely spot on there. Knowledge is very empowering in itself. Even if you can't do everything you're learning about yet, you know what path you're on. Thank you so much. That's Ben Kelleher from ANZ.
Pleasure.
Now, if you have questions about this, anything else to do with money, do get in touch with me. You can find me on Facebook, Frances Cook Journalist, Twitter, Frances Cook, Instagram, Frances Cook NZ. Send those questions through. I'll try to get them answered on a future podcast episode for you. You can also subscribe to Cooking the Books everywhere you find podcasts, including iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Until next time, have a great day.